My name is Bisan Saleh. I'm the Business Development Manager in Art Concept. And today I'm going to be moderating this session on behalf of Art Concept. We're pleased to have you with us tonight as part of Agora, the digital art space of Art Concept. It's a platform dedicated to the art, to the dialogue, to exchanging ideas, and shared our reflection. Today's session, we want you to slow down and reconsider Tatreez embroidery, not only as a form of embroidery, but also as a cultural language, one that carries memory, identity, and continuity through generations. I would just want to stress that before we start, we're also excited to share that Haya is going to conduct a workshop with us online. So please tune in on Art Concept account and Khutbeh account on Facebook and Instagram and check what's happening. So you can join the workshop which is happening next week. We're very pleased to be joined by Haya Natsheh. Haya is a Palestinian Tatreez practitioner and artist from Jerusalem. She's currently based in London. Her work engages with embroidery as a living practice, one that exists within everyday's life, shaped by repetition, movement, and continuity. Working across both traditional cross-stitch and tahriri, she brings attention to the depth and diversity of Palestinian textile traditions, while opening space for their understanding within the contemporary context. Through her practice and workshops, she creates thoughtful and accessible entry points into Tatreez, connecting technique with cultural meaning and lived experience. Thank you, Haya, for joining us. Thank you, everyone, and we leave the mic with Haya.
Thank you, Bisan. Thank you so much for the great introduction, and thank you everyone for being here today. It's such a pleasure. Thank you for taking interest also in this topic. Before I begin, I also want to sincerely thank Art Concept for hosting this evening and making this space open for this conversation. Again, my name is Haya. I come from Jerusalem, born and raised in Jerusalem, and I currently reside in London. My background is in translation and cultural studies, and later in comparative politics. And over time, those fields slowly shaped the way I began reading Tatreez or understanding Tatreez or approaching the Palestinian embroidery differently. Like many Palestinians, my first relationship to Tatreez was emotional and instinctive. It belonged to the world of grandmothers, wedding thobes, inherited fabrics, family homes, and old photographs. But over time, what began as familiarity slowly became curiosity and eventually research. And I think that shift from simply seeing Tatreez to trying to read it is really what brought me to this talk tonight. Right, I'll move to here. One of the questions I kept returning to while preparing this talk was how translation, culture studies, and comparative politics all somehow converge through Tatreez, actually. And I think the answer lies in the fact that Tatreez behaves very similarly to language itself. Like language, it contains symbols, regional dialects, historical shifts, layers of meaning that are not immediately visible to outsiders. Through motifs, colors, placement, and repetition, Palestinian women recorded geography, memory, mourning, social identity, and attachment to land across generations. And the more time I spent reading about Palestinian dress traditions and engaging with the work of researchers and practitioners in this field, the more I realized how vast and layered this history truly is. So before going on, I want to acknowledge the many embroiderers, archivists, historians, artists, and researchers whose work made conversations like this possible. People like Wadat Kawar, Maha Sakka, Hanan Munayr, Rachel Dedman, Tanya Nasser, Nabil Anani, Sliman Mansour, and many others spent decades documenting and preserving Palestinian dress traditions. There's a quote by Mahassa'a that I return to often where she says, myself and another million people won't be enough to study the Palestinian heritage. And I think that sentence captures something very important about this field. So, the more I studied Tatreez, the more I realized that it functions simultaneously as archive memory and visual communication. What makes this especially remarkable is that much of this archive was built collectively by women, often outside formal institutions or written historiography. Through cloth, color, and stitch, Palestinian women documented social life, grief, agriculture, rural environments, political situation, regional identity across generations, and unlike institutional archives, this archive moved with the body itself. It was worn, inherited, altered, repaired, mourned in, celebrated in, and carried across exile. So if we think about it, people from Palestine maybe had to leave their homes, had to leave their land at 1948 and many other instances before. But women carried their thobes with them. They carried the history that's embroidered on the thobe with them, and it moved with them throughout their lives. Many of you at this point might be asking, but what is Tatreez actually? What is the word Tatreez? So I'll say before anything else, before going into more details or motifs and symbolism, Tatreez simply word-to-word translation means embroidery. But within the Palestinian context, it evolved into highly sophisticated visual tradition practiced primarily through the making of the thobe, the embroidered traditional dress. And importantly, the embroidery was never arbitrary. Motifs, colors, fabric choices, and placement all carried meaning. Through the thobe, women could communicate regional identity, marital status, social class, age, spirituality, mourning, and later even political affiliation. Therefore, the Palestinian thobe functioned socially as something much larger than clothing alone. Let's move to Tatreez as language. Before the 1948, especially, embroidery traditions across Palestine were highly localized and visually recognizable. Women from Ramallah embroidered differently from women in Hebron. Gaza traditions differed from Jaffa traditions. Bethlehem, for example, developed a whole other technique entirely distinct from the Galilee or the north of Palestine. And these differences appeared not only through motifs themselves, but also through color palettes and fabric types and garment structure. And the thobe therefore operated most like a visual passport through which identity could be immediately recognized. A woman's thobe could often communicate where she came from, as I've mentioned, whether she was married, whether she was wealthy, whether at what stage in life she is in. So, and fabric itself also carried the meaning. The Majdalawi fabric from Al Majdal became famous for its striped weaving traditions, while Jannah and Nar fabric, which literally means heaven and hell, became associated with dramatic red and green silk compositions around Jerusalem. The Rabbani fabrics reflected Ottoman silk circulations and luxurious woven structures, while Saya fabrics became associated with flowing outer garments were across several regions. And here on the slide, you could see that we will go further with examples from each of the cities. So for example, Bethlehem Thob, known for its qabba, which is the chest panel here, of how luxurious it is and how the hand-woven indigo linen, it has been made with woven indigo linen or silk and with dense couching technique, not cross-stitching like most of other areas in Palestine. While Ramallah's thobe is one of the oldest and most, let's say, dense and widely documented styles in Palestine, it's very well known for its white base and wine red silk thread. And then moving to other cities, Al Khalil has striking colors and geometric in the thobe. While Gaza, for example, because Al Majdal is right or used to be like part of the area of Gaza, they used the striped Jannah and Nar, or heaven and hell, they used to call it, because it's black and another very bright color in their thobes, which is beautiful just in the meaning that it carries. Like that depth to be reflected in like cloth on you, on your body, is such a deep meaning that women were able to capture. And then moving to Jaffa and other coastal areas, you could see the colors changing, you could see the motifs changing as well, and even the fabric that is used in their thobes, because they had to adjust also to the climate, to the humidity of the coastal areas they lived in. So there was no one thobe that is identical to the other, no one thobe that is identical from one city to another. The fabrics. Let me just move to here. Second. The fabrics. Palestinians, as I said, never used one fabric or one type of fabric. It used to be different types of fabrics, each based on how accessible it is for them to get it. Many of these fabrics were imported from Sham, from Damascus, some of it from Egypt, some of it, of course, locally made. And there's let's say the accessibility to get these fabrics, but also I hate to link it that way, but it did used to say how financially able the family is or the woman is, because, for example, the velvet fabric is much more expensive, and the silk as well. And then other people chose to use the Rumi fabric, which people could tell like what is the financial background of that woman or of that family just through the fabrics that are used on the thobe. Here are various examples of the fabrics. And you could see that the Majdalawi was part of a certain area or spread around a certain area. Jannah Nar is the same or part of Al Majdalawi fabric. The saya was part of the outer garment in Jerusalem. Ghabani, which we could see on the photo on the left-hand side, is the fabric itself was brought from Syria, and then the chest panel was made in couching. This, unfortunately, the Ghabani is almost non-existent right now, just because the families who were producing this or weaving this in Syria are no longer there. And to get an Ghabani, I don't know, meter is just almost impossible, and would cost a fortune. So unfortunately, lots of these very valuable, let's say, garments and fabrics are no longer accessible just because of how the political situation evolved in the region, whether in Palestine or in the countries surrounding it. I'll move now. I'm very aware of time, but I'll move now to the structure of the thobe. As you can see from the slides, there are different parts, sorry, of a thobe. And a thobe, by the way, is not tailored in one piece. It's tailored into those many pieces and then linked together, either normally or in managil stitch, which in the workshop I'll show examples of. I'll just point out that the qabbe, or the chest panel, which is the area here, is the main part of a thobe and carries, let's say, the most complex meanings of the woman wearing it, because that's where you usually read the woman through the chest panel. It used to tell you a lot about the person wearing it. And another important point here is to say that the embroidery placed on which part in the thobe also carried a meaning. It wasn't just visual. So, for examples, in many traditions, openings around the chest, the sleeves, the hems were symbolically understood as vulnerable spaces. So this part carried lots of protective motifs or lots of heavy motifs, believing that it protected the person wearing it from negative energy, evil eye, etc. So even the density of the Tatreez and on which part it sat on the thobe carried a meaning. It's very interesting to know that before we see all of these motifs and Tatreez stitches on the thobes or in many pieces around us, the very first initial motifs of Tatreez were geometric. So they didn't take the shape of a star or of a grape or of a bird. It just started as zigzags, stars, triangles, diamonds, etc., very abstract forms, and they slowly evolved into more recognizable symbolic imagery like trees, flowers, birds, etc., because women used to contemplate and observe the nature surrounding them and then put that on their dresses. That's why you see lots of flora and fauna on the thobes. And the evolution, of course, matters because it reminds us that Tatreez was never static. It's just like language again. It changes gradually across the generations, and some of it survived almost unchanged, although other and many motifs were transformed regionally just by women coming together from different areas in different history points, and we will come to that later. Researchers like Nabil Anani and Sliman Mansour have written extensively, of course, about these historical motifs that we use up until today, and you can see most of it of what I'm wearing. But there are, let's say, more contemporary artists like Shireen Quttaine, for example, who recently launched a new set of motifs called the Forbidden Plants of Palestine, where, because we literally have plants that grow by nature in our land, but we cannot like harvest them or we cannot come near them by the Israeli government. So she designed motifs to represent those forbidden plants like za'atar, like meramiye, like khubbeze, like huerne, like akub. And this is so beautiful and is also worth documenting and also worth putting on thobes because in 40 or 50 or 60 years' time, it will be referred to as a historic motif. Just the same way I'm now referring to all of these motifs as historic. You could see the forbidden plants of Palestine in the middle of the slide. The key, for example, was never a historical motif, but it's something that developed with time after people had to leave their homes in the Nakba in 1948. Carrying the key of the house, it evolved as a motif. Same for the watermelon, representing the colors of the Palestinian flag. And as you can see, the design on the right, it's if we studied the historical motifs, maybe none of them or only the motif on the top in black existed in history books. The rest are motifs that evolved with time and designers put it together until it made, for example, the Palestinian flag. I'll move a little bit back in history now because to understand Tatreez, it's important to stop at a certain point that it carries traces of much older visual histories. Researchers often discuss continuities between Palestinian embroidery traditions and olden Canaanite, Byzantine, and later Ottoman visual systems. Even Egyptian depositions of Canaanite dress reveal structural similarities in silhouette and textile decoration and feel surprisingly familiar when placed beside historical Palestinian garments, for example. Of course, these continuities are complex and layered, but what becomes very clear is that Palestinian embroidery evolved through centuries of cultural accumulation rather than isolation. And Palestine historically sat at the intersection of Africa, Asia, and Europe, and its textile tradition absorbed influences through trade, migration, pilgrimage, and empire, while still developing into something distinctly local. I've mentioned at the beginning that even colors carried meaning. So, color itself carried emotional and social meaning within the thobe. Historically, many dyes were sourced naturally from indigo or madder root plants, shells, insects, and minerals. Red, which dominates many historical thobes, became associated with vitality, fertility, celebration, and marriage. That's why usually when women used to see another woman wearing a thobe heavy in red, they could tell her age roughly and at what stage in life she's in. Blue increasingly became connected to mourning, sadness, and grief, and protection as well in some parts of Palestine, particularly among widowed women and older generations. Black could communicate modesty, dignity, or sorrow depending on context, while white often remained associated with celebration and ceremonial dresses. These meanings were socially understood and visually legible with Palestinian society, and they were never detached from the lived experience. This slide makes me very sad, to be honest, but I had to put it on because it's just fascinating how women use the thobe to express what they are going through. These are two different thobes, by the way. The one on the right, if you could see, it's torn from here. This is a thobe. I got this picture from my friend Bisan al-Haj that runs Thobe now on Instagram, and she's in Palestine and travels widely among towns and villages and meets elderly women. This thobe is older than like 90 or 100 years old. And as we said, the chest panel is one of the most important parts of a thobe. Many women, long time ago, when they used to lose someone very important to them in their lives, usually a husband, God forbid, or a son or a daughter, to express sadness, they would tear the chest panel and leave it torn up until they heal from that pain. And then once they feel healed or have moved on or overcame that, many of them would stitch it back together. And that way people would know that the woman has overcame that situation in her life. So it's really, it struck me when it's the first time I saw a thobe torn from that part, and it's just beautiful, but also very sad how that meaning was carried. The picture on the left is of the same thobe. Basically, the red is for the woman when she was a bride or a young person starting her life, and then she added the blue when she lost her husband. And then, not that she's saying that she's willing to remarry or anything, because many people understand it that way, but meaning that she started feeling better after years and years, or she was able to pick herself up again. She added next to the blue motifs or thread in red color, not fully, not similar as the original one, but just a little bit of red in between the blue to show people that I had sorrow, I had sadness in my life, I'm overcoming it, or I overcame it, and I added some red or bright color again into my thobe. And now we will move to more further details that even myself as a Palestinian at the beginning, I had no idea about. I would start cross-stitching them, not knowing 100% what they mean up until I sat down and studied this. One of the most common motifs on the thobes are the amulets, and this came from the belief that you put it around your body to protect you. So it's both spiritual and a deeply protective dimension. So instead of women wearing the amulets like in a necklace or as part of their inner clothing, they would just cross stitch it on their tops, especially around the neckline, the chest opening again, and the sleeves, because these are the openings of the body, and they believe that's where the negative energy could creep into your body from. So that's where most of the amulets, as you could see on the thobe in this picture here, where it was spread. Then I'll move to another very famous motif called Ain al-Baqara, or the eye of the cow. It is also a protective and symbolic motif associated with watchfulness or warding off envy. And people also placed it around the openings of the body to ward off any negative eye or envy. And then I'll move to one of the most used and widely spread motifs in the Palestinian Tatreez. It's the cypress tree or the tree of life. People call it differently, or historians call it differently. And you could see there are many variations of it because, of course, cypress trees did not look identical in each region in Palestine. And over time, it started carrying the meaning of rootedness, endurance, continuity, and permanence. And even in later literature or more recent literature, it became as a symbol of Palestinian women and the way they stand tall, strong in their land, refusing to give up. And that's why you see many of the thobes full of many variations of the cypress trees or sarwe in Arabic. Then you could also see lots of oranges, olives, wheat, grapes, and many, many other things that are edible. Just again, as I said, because women used to look around them, the nature, whatever trees they saw, whatever fruits, anything in the nature they saw, they used to try to place it on the thobe or to try to stitch it. And again, you'd see various variations, for example, عرق الزيتون, or for the orange nafnouf, as we call it in the Tatreez language. And each one, I wouldn't say was just specific for one region, but for example, it made most sense that the orange one came from the thobes around Jaffa, because that's where oranges mainly grow, while grapes were like widely shown on the thobes for women around Hebron, Ariel, Khalil, and the area around it, because that's the most rich land in grapes, let's say. Then there are motifs of birds and horses, and that also had different meanings. Animals appear less frequently, of course, in the Palestinian embroidery than geometric or botanical motifs, but when they do appear, they carry strong symbolic meaning. Birds are usually associated with migration, movement, beauty, longing, or freedom. Horses often represent dignity, prestige, and mobility. And once again, Palestinian embroidery rarely attempts literal realism. Nature becomes stylized or abstracted and integrated into larger symbolic systems. And Tatreez is less intersected in copying the world exactly than in translating it visually into a meaning. Another very well-known motif is Khaymat al-Basha, or the Pasha's tent. It became one of the most recognizable motifs associated particularly with Hebron embroidery traditions. The motif reflects the Ottoman historical influence and carries associations with prestige, authority, ceremony, and architecture, and lots of movement because people would move altogether where the Pasha moves. And it also reminds us that the Palestinian embroidery again evolved historically through continuous interaction with larger political and economic worlds, because the Ottoman rule influenced textile circulation as well, metallic thread traditions, and material available throughout the region. I'll move now to the Bethlehem tradition. I think you've realized or you've noticed that most of the previous examples we've shown, the Tatreez or the cross stitch has the X shape. It's in an X shape, which is the cross stitch, or the way we call it, the Fallahi stitch. And it's the most number one used stitch in Palestine. The other one is the tahriri or the couching method, which you could see on the screen on the sleeves and on the chest panel. Um, I learned it recently. It's a love and labor. Not that it's more complicated than the cross stitch. It's just that it's more fluid and you should like it takes really artists to be able to design that chest panel. And these are also motifs, by the way. The one on the right top is the watch. This is the motif of a watch. And then the chest panel in here also carried amulets. There are also motifs of birds, of even how many kids the lady had. They would even design that on the thobe. But this was very specific to the area of Bethlehem, Beit Jala, Beit Sahur, later on Jerusalem and some towns surrounding Jerusalem. And I watched a documentary the other day saying that it was an elderly Bethlehem woman, one of the very first who did the Tahriri stitch. She said, we had secrets in the Tahriri stitch that we refused to share with anyone who is not from Bethlehem. We would tell them, bring your thobes to us, we will do it for you. But we won't teach anyone very specific details. And I believe her. I do know that maybe now more people are like looking into Tahriri and studying it because it isn't as heavily documented as the Fallahi. But you could tell that there are specific secrets that were really never shared. It just stayed with the woman from Bethlehem. And actually, she said that many homes, and by that she means like many families, made a fortune or became financially stable because of the amount of women later on from other areas who used to bring their thobes or the material, the fabric, to women in Bethlehem and ask them to do their thobes for them. Just by Bethlehem women making thobes, many people, she said, made a fortune, built homes, were able to send their kids to schools and give them an education. I'll move to clothing, fabric, and social status, which we touched on in the introduction. And the way embroidery communicated lots of meaning, it also carried enormous significance because the quality of the cloth, as I said, and the density of the stitching means that you spent more money to make this thobe happen. The more silk you used, if you did like a straight, let's say, kumme, which is the sleeve, if you did a straight sleeve, it would really, you'd use less fabric than if you did the bigger one. And that's why, for example, the bigger open sleeves, the irdan, we call it, is just seen now as a nicer thobe because it used more fabric, it used more silk, etc. So it used to communicate the class and the economic status immediately from the thobe whenever you see a woman. The more it's heavy, like the picture on the top, that's Ramallah thobe. In black because they are elderly, but it's known that their chest panels and the sleeves are very heavily stitched because it just represented or reflected their economic status. So wealthier women could afford denser embroidery, imported fabrics, metallic thread, and ceremonial garments reserved for their weddings or for their important occasions. This is one of the most beautiful things I could ever see. I can look at it for ages. The one on the top right, at least the headscarf is now in the Victoria and Albert Museum in London. is being displayed there. Because in our culture, marriage is a huge thing, of course, and that means your thobe needs to reflect that. So it transformed the dress very significantly within the Palestinian society. The bridal thobe became among the most elaborate garments a woman would own during her lifetime, and they would hold it for all their lifetime, lovingly and very proud, because that's her wedding dress. They didn't wear the white wedding dress, that's her wedding dress. And I carried more than one, like with some of them, it could reach up to 4 and 5 kilos because of the amount of cross stitch on it. So like the one on the top, on sorry, the bottom right, it's very heavily stitched on the side. Sometimes even when you wear it, I have a similar one to the one on the top, on the bottom right. Even when I wear it, I could feel it from the sides heavying down where the Tatreez is because it does weigh a lot, and that for most women just showed how much meaning and beauty is put into this dress. And again, bridal garments were not simply decorative. They marked major social transition from, single life into marriage life. And you could tell that visually from the looking at the thobe. And most importantly, many thobes remained with these women for decades, as we said, and some of them gave it to their daughters, and it stayed with the daughter. They would upcycle it or try to keep it. For example, what I'm wearing is consisted of different parts of old thobes. So people do now keep the different good usable parts of old thobes and put it together or upcycle it into different pieces to keep those garments, because also even now as a practitioner, no much how good we try to cross stitch or use the best quality items, it's just not the same as the ones that used to be done years and years ago. Again, being aware of time, I'll move through these quicker. I wanted to spend more time on the Ottoman influence and the textile circulation and exchange, but I could cut this short and say that again, Palestine sat at the intersection of many important merchandise routes, and through movement between cities, between Jerusalem, Damascus, Cairo, Aleppo, Istanbul, fabrics, stitches, and dyes were circulated constantly. And especially Bethlehem, because of the pilgrims' movements into there, silk and metallic thread was always available, which made thobes of very deep value and very, let's say, beautiful design available for the people who were in that area. Then we can move to the European influence and the missionary schools and the modernity that started coming to Palestine, of course, at a certain age, when people started seeing, for example, different motifs or different colors or designs on other women who visited Palestine during pilgrimage or tourists. And they started having this curiosity to copy or to make something similar. So you could see also the influence of other cultures or other countries on the Palestinian embroidery. And unfortunately, as always, capitalism, but DMC, a thread which now we all use, and it proved to be one of the best in quality for cross stitching. It overtook the local, let's say, thread making and dyeing practices and businesses, and DMC started becoming the thread to use for cross stitching. We cannot speak about Tatreez and not stop at this point at the Nakba, because it was a transitional point of time, also for the Thob, more than 100,000 Palestinians were displaced and villages were destroyed through the Nakba. And that meant families fragmented and entire social worlds were violently interrupted. And with this displacement, the fragmentation of textile also came like as a tradition themselves. Garments were abandoned, of course, because through war, who had time for garments? Some of them were carried into exile, sold for survival, and I did read in more than one book that many women had to sell their thobes to just survive a specific stage during Nakba, or many of it was lost permanently because when many women used to wear thobes all the time back then. Many of them were not, of course, wearing their wedding thobe when the Nakba happened. So they left the most valuable item at home, thinking they'll return to it, but it was lost. Some of it permanently, some of it not. And embroidery traditions tied to particular villages suddenly became geographically disconnected from the place that produced them. And Nabil Anani does highlight this in many of his writings, saying that as much as they tried to document Palestinian Tatreez and practices, some things were never documented just because it got fragmented. It left with the women who left back then, and it was never documented or written down. But despite all of this, Tatreez survived, and in many cases, embroidery itself became one of the few things Palestinian women could materially carry across exile. As I said, they had to leave the house behind them, but they carried the thobe that they were wearing with them to exile. And that held continuity when geography itself became inaccessible. So after the 1948, Tatreez increasingly transformed from regional dress tradition into a much broader symbolic Palestinian continuity and survival. This part for me is very important just because this is the part where you could no longer tell where the woman came from when you look at her motif or at her thobe. Because in refugee camps, women from Hebron or Jaffa or Bir Sabah or Gaza all of a sudden found themselves in the same community, in the same refugee camp. And when they were able to pick up cross-stitching or tatreez again and started doing tatreez again, they started exchanging motifs together. So, for example, you would see the orange from Jaffa on the thobe of a woman from Hebron, from Al Khalil. Or you would see the, let's say, coastal motifs on the thobe of a woman from Bir Saba, where it's a desert. It's beautiful in how this was exchanged, and it created a hybrid style towards expressing a broader Palestinian identity. But I sometimes feel bad. I wish we were able to keep it the same way as it is, but still, it's one of the things I think that just changed over time. And then it moved also from regional after that to a national identity because, again, before the 1948, Tatreez communicated locality. It spoke about the village, the region, the family, the identity. After displacement, it began carrying different emotional and political function. And the thobe increasingly came to represent Palestine itself, not just the village or the town, rather as the whole of Palestine. And this transformation is extremely important historically because the meaning of embroidery expanded alongside the political transformation of Palestinian life itself. Tatreez became tied to exile, return, continuity, and survival. The embroidered body became a site through which Palestinians materially carried homeland across borders and generations. Tatreez did not stop there. It even evolved further. By the time of the First Intifada in the 1987, Palestinian embroidery had become explicitly political in new ways because the Palestinian flag back then was criminalized for the very first time under the Israeli occupation. So, if we couldn't raise the flag, women began stitching the national symbols directly into the dresses themselves, the flag colors, the map, the kufiyyah, the political slogans, and the nationalist iconography. These garments became known as Intifada dresses. Many women wear them across the West Bank and Gaza and even Jerusalem. And what becomes remarkable here is that the body itself became a political surface. Embroidery transformed into direct visual resistance. But this evolution, again, did not stop here. Very, very recently, I think less than a month ago or 2 months, I've started seeing a new thobe or a new dress called a Tufan dress, which goes back to October 2023. And this also shows that practitioners and artists are attempting to process the present historical moment materially through embroidery. And I think this is important because it reminds us that Tatreez is evolving historically in real time rather than just remaining frozen in the past. Over time, Tatreez became more than embroidery alone. It became archive, testimony, continuity, and memory simultaneously. And perhaps what gives Palestinian embroidery such emotional force today is precisely the accumulation of this historical weight. A stitch is no longer carried only aesthetically, but it carries displacement, inheritance, and grief, as we explained. I have to touch on the point that just like anything else, Palestinian Tatreez has been appropriated a lot and has been described as so many things that is not Tatreez, like Middle Eastern folk art, Bedouin art. It's been commercialized globally, exhibited without attribution to its people, and stripped from the people who produced it. And that's why you'll see a lot of research on Tatreez appropriation and the Israeli, making the Palestinian Tatreez Israeli or claiming that it is Israeli. But Alhamdulillah, it has been recognized by the UNESCO and as a heritage of the Palestinian people, etc. But it is something very important that we remain mindful and aware of. Tatreez today exists simultaneously within museums, fashion, activism, digital archives, diaspora workshops, talks like the one we have today. Some of practitioners focus on historical precision and preservation, while others experiment with silhouette, fabric, placement, and conceptual approaches. And I think all of this is valid because living traditions cannot survive through preservation alone. They also survive through continued reuse, reinterpretation, and experimentation and relevance to present life, of course. And before I end, I would like to make a very important point because I encounter this. I carry my Tatreez projects nowadays with me wherever I go, on a plane, in a coffee shop, etc. And people would stop and ask, like, this is beautiful, what is this? And I would explain that it's Palestinian cross-stitching. And less than maybe 2 or 3 weeks, the person I said this to, she was like, but why do you call it Palestinian cross-stitching? We have it back home. It's very similar. And I was like, where do you come from? She said, Greece. And that's very true. So I want to say that embroidery is not exclusive to Palestine. And embroidery has been a language for the indigenous for so many years in Mexico, Morocco, Turkey, China, many places. Everyone has their own embroidery traditions with striking similarities, by the way, in shapes or in protective motifs or in fertility symbols, birds and flowers. So I have to acknowledge that this does not weaken the Palestinian specificity at all. In fact, I think it strengthens our understanding of Tatreez by placing it within a much larger human history of women recording worlds materially through textile tradition. I actually often think of this very similar to the olive trees. Olive trees exist across many countries and landscapes, and they are not uniquely Palestinian. But what makes Palestinian olive trees carry such emotional and political force is that Palestinians were repeatedly separated from them, dispossessed from them, and threatened with losing them entirely. And often, when something becomes endangered or people hold onto it even more. And this operates with Tatreez similarly. Its significance today is not only about the beauty or the uniqueness, it's also about the dispossession or just the refusal of it to appear as a Palestinian heritage. For those interested in continuing today's journey or reading more, I'm aware a lot of information was shared today. It's a very huge topic. I try to touch on everything, but if anyone is interested, I've shared here like a couple of resources for further reading, and if you want like researching or knowing more about. I just want to say thank you all so much for being here tonight. And again, thank you to Art Concept for hosting this evening and making this space for this conversation. For anyone interested, I will also be giving a Tatreez workshop, as in literally cross-stitching together with Art Concept on the 24th. And we will move from discussing this historically to literally doing the stitches together. If you'd like to continue the conversation or follow my future work or stay connected, you could follow my page by this QR code or just contact me through this email. And thank you all so much.
Thank you so much, Haya, for an amazing, amazing, interesting, full of information presentation. Before we continue, I just want to ask everyone if you can open your cameras just for a second. We're going to take a group photo, if that's okay. If you're comfortable, please open your camera. And again, thank you so much, Haya, for everything. And we're so excited about the workshop, and we look forward. So please, everyone who is interested, just follow Art Concept and Khutbeh on Instagram, and you'll learn more about the workshop. It's going to be very exciting. And we're going to open, after the picture, we're going to open for the Q&A.
The question. Okay, because I'm waiting for to ask. And thank you so much, Haya. Amazing presentation. Yani, a lot of information, but it's really يعني what it call it. I'm so proud كمان إنه
Thank you, Jihan.
إن والله بيكي فعلا يعني presentation رائعة، وكتير فخورة إنه ده في تاريخنا
تاريخنا لسه أعمق.
تاريخنا أعمق. Exactly. Thank you so much. بناخد الصورة وبعدين نسألك بقى.
أكيد.
Okay, thank you.
Again, I'm going to remind you, if you're comfortable and you want to open your camera, you're more than welcome. If you're not, it's okay. And thank you again for joining. We'll have a short Q&A with Haya. So just taking some photos. So if you have any questions, you can just unmute and we'll take it one by one with Haya.
I just saw the people in the because I stopped sharing. Oh my God, so many family members and friends I haven't seen in a while. Thank you all for joining. Makes me so happy. So many colleagues. Thank you.
Yeah, if you have, okay, we have Zaina. She has a question. You can unmute yourself, Zaina, please.
It's just a question. It would be really lovely to have it in Arabic as well, because Arabic is very much like your Tatreez. It's our culture language. So it would be lovely to have the same talk in Arabic.
I was discussing with Bisan while preparing. I asked her, shall we have it in English or in Arabic? Because recently I've been making this conscious decision of uh, decolonizing myself and my language. And then we couldn't really decide because we didn't know like what audience to expect. But we discussed briefly before today while testing the links and everything that we'll either do subtitles or record it again in Arabic or like make the presentation itself available in Arabic. But I 100% agree with you, Zaina, that احنا يعني التطريز بيحكي اللغة العربية واحنا يمكن الأفضل أكيد نقدمه باللغة العربية.
I think I'll just add maybe also because of the audience and just to have it, you know, for more people to understand. There's a very important message that Haya is conveying. And I think also it's very important for others to learn about our culture and our heritage, our motifs, our background, you know. We're not just people, we have so much that connects us and our culture, and it's very important for others to understand that as well. بس definitely طبعا كلنا بنحب نحكي عربي we're gonna do it. Thank you, Zaina. Okay, we have Helena. Please unmute yourself, Helena.
Hi, Haya. I actually have two questions. The first one, do you think women stitched emotions into Tatreez the way people write journals today?
I think so because, again, for example, when women prepared their wedding thobes, they used a lot of red, a lot of fuchsia, a lot of colors that are bright, that reflected the state that they are in. So their emotions, their excitement, their happiness. And the way we said they added, for example, blue onto red to just show or express the sadness that they are going through when they lose someone. So definitely, I can't remember in which book I read that, but it said something similar to that. Thobes weren't just like a passport; they were like a diary of the woman, because you know some women just took their time in their thobe, like they didn't do it overnight. They would start with the chest panel and then slowly add something to the sides, to the banayiq, etc. So definitely, Hilani, I think that's a very deep observation of thobe and how women weaved their feelings in it. Definitely.
Beautiful. And my second question, it's actually for you, since unfortunately you're away from home, or maybe fortunately for your good reasons. Now the question is, do you think Tatreez changes when it's stitched in diaspora or away from home compared to being stitched at home?
Hilani. Okay. It could be, and I'm speaking from a very personal aspect now. It could be that, you know, we never feel the real value of something when we have it and when we are in it, right? Let me see. Do we have my sisters here? One of them was here. That sister, I think Yoruba. Yeah, there she is. We used to have a corner back in the family house a long time ago, a corner full of Tatreez garments and pieces, which my dad is a merchant, so other merchants from Ramallah, etc., used to gift him. And then over time, we wanted to modernize our house. So now we don't know where these items are, and this drives me crazy because now I know the value of it. So I think back home, maybe Tatreez is not as valued as it should be, although at the same time, I could see lots of galleries and artists and designers doing more and more thobes and Tatreez, which means there's a demand and people hopefully understand the meaning of it. But for practicing Tatreez, I learned Tatreez just, I don't know if you remember, we learned it at school. I stopped for a long while, but the moment I went back to Tatreez religiously was when I left home, when I got married and moved to the UK. And I do most of my stitching now as wouldn't say in exile, but now as I live abroad. It it has a different meaning because it keeps you connected to what means to you. You find it as a way that you express yourself differently. You want to hold on to something that now is far away from you. And me and my sister-in-law always say that it's a stress relief as well. It helps you get through stress and overthinking a lot. It definitely has different meanings in exile or abroad, but hopefully all of them are as deep as Tatreez itself is. Thank you.
Thank you, Haya. Thank you, Habibti.
Yeah, we have Jihan. Jihan, please unmute yourself.
Jihan. Thank you again, Haya. عندي 3 أسئلة في واحد. اوكي يعني سؤال طويل شوية. how long it takes to يعني نعمل ثوب الديلي ثوب والويدنج أو للعروسة، وهل بس يعني كم شخص بيشترك في ده الثوب، ولا هو لازم يكون بس هي صاحبة الثوب اللي تعمله؟ لا طبعا مستحيل. اوكي ف3 أسئلة في سؤال واحد. Thank you.
I'll be honest. Making a thobe, especially by us, يعني we're not tailors, we're not designers, etc., is the most advanced level of Tatreez. Not because it's the same technique. You cross-stitch the same way. It's putting the thobe together, the designs, choosing which motifs go where, the colors, etc. I would say a daily thobe, يعني the one, not the bridal one. If you dedicate time for it daily to work on it, I wouldn't say how many hours a day, but let's say if you dedicate some time daily to do working on the thobe, it will take 6 to 8 months. And that's you by yourself, right? The wedding thobe, I would multiply that. It would be a year minimum and more, because thobes are very dense. It's not like the pieces I have behind me. These are dense as pieces, but thobe is very dense and, it's huge, huge. And then what takes time is, as I explained, it's not tailored in one piece like a dress. It's tailored into more than 8 pieces. And then the sleeve is put on near the chest, and then the other sleeve, and then the badan, and then the banayak, and then the dil, right? So that's also one of the things that we should plan for when we want to calculate the time. You asked a very important question, like whether it's just one woman. Actually, Tatreez is very communal. It's never, especially a long time ago, it's never one person working on, or one woman working on the thobe. Usually a thobe, especially the bridal one, it would be the bride herself, her mother and her sisters and her khalat and her ammat. Each one takes a part and work on it. And usually the funny thing, you could tell because like this sleeve, of course, it looks
and
like
it
this
looks
sleeve,
different
but
أكيد.
the X's, the stitches
yeah,
are maybe like not as relaxed as the other sleeve,
of
etc.
course.
It looks beautiful because that's also one of the meanings.
Exactly.
It's never done in isolation. One of my friends the other day, she was wearing a button-down shirt with Tatreez on it, and I wanted to say, like, there's something about it. And she's like, yeah, I know. It's my husband, me, and my mother and his mother working on it. Each one picks it up whenever we have time. And this is beautiful
of
because
course sharing
yeah,
all
sharing.
sharing all. بس أنا يعني إذا ده الثوب اللي هو الديلي اللي يوميا تلبسه المرأة، أنا أتكلم عن نورمال يعني سيدة فلسطينية. يعني إذا الواحد ياخد 6 months، يعني إزاي تعمل كل ملابسها؟ يعني هو ثوبها الوحيد، يعني بيكون عندها ثوب واحد مثلا أو ثوبين.
Women long time ago, precisely يعني 1948 and before, in all their lives they used to have 2 to 3 thobes.
Yeah.
The bridal thobe, the one that one she
Makes
would
sense.
always wear to other ceremonies or other weddings, depending. The thobe of, especially if she came from a farmer, let's say, background, the thobe for farming, because that would be
work
command, and one that she would wear daily. Like in other, many women, it's documented that they used to have maximum 3 thobes.
3 thobes. والصيف والشتاء نفس الشيء?
No, it depends on the region.
The fabric.
From where they usually played more with the fabric. Yeah, one that would be thicker, one that would be lighter.
Light. Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you so much again.
No problem. No problem.
We have more questions.
Helena, is this an old
Helena? Yeah, I'm not sure. Helena, do you have more questions? You can unmute yourself.
No, that's all. Sorry.
No problem.
Thank you again. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Haya, so much. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. And please stay in touch and join the workshop.
Thank you, everyone. It means a lot to me that you took interest in this. I hope you found it as informative as you expected and you enjoyed it. And yeah, let's stay in touch.